they don't know what exactly the minister of the diaspora do. So what is exactly your job as minister of the diaspora?
It's a nice way to ask what are you doing in the town. But I can tell you that most of the Israelis also don't know what the minister of diaspora does. So I'm in the only position. I'm in charge of the relationship between the diaspora, the Jewish diaspora, which makes like 8 million people, and the state of Israel, where there are a little bit over 7 million. So you still belong. My community is larger than the Jewish community in the country. And I'm supposed to look for projects, initiatives, partnerships that will strengthen the relationship on both ends, in the diaspora on one hand and in Israel on the other hand. On both ends we should work very hard. But let me tell you, I feel after a short visit to Mexico City that I don't have to convince you about Israel, but I have to convince Israelis about the importance and the relevance of the diaspora to Israel. Many of them do not get it. And I don't like them. It's not part of their daily schedule or daily life. And we have full life in Israel and so many concerns on our minds that sometimes it's hard to tell them what it was. Something is cooking in Cancun. They said, okay, Cancun is far away, couldn't care less. And I'm the one who's supposed to carry the message that the Jewish people is one, and we are united, and we care for the same things, and we have a common destiny. It's not the same.
But it's an important change in Israel, because for Zionism it's very important, the role of the diaspora. And what you are saying is that in Israel they are losing this relationship with the diaspora, or they don't give a lot of attention to what's happening with the Jewish communities around the world.
There is a generational change here on both ends. I'm sure that the original generation of Mexican Jews had different perception of Israel in comparison with you, or with comparison with the young generation. And we should work very hard not to lose the young generation, because they are, first of all, the commitment is a little bit weaker. The miracle of having a Jewish state is over. Looking at the episode over there, okay? So I'm asking myself, what is the next, no room on the wall, but what's the next chapter, okay? It should be, by the way, I DCI is too small. I think you have to expand it a little bit, Marcus. It's really, I see no sports, no soccer games here, no. So next time I come, make it bigger, okay? That's but I'm kidding. The point is that we watch the change in Israel. 78% of the Israelis were born in Israel, and they look and they don't know what diaspora is. My mother, my father, my mother, they came from the diaspora, like hundreds of thousands of Jews, and many of them after 1948. So they knew what the diaspora is. They experienced it by their own life. Israelis, they don't know what it means. We are the majority. Think about one single state on earth, and the Jews are the majority. By the way, it has a special responsibility for the minority. We'll talk about it. For you, also, dealing with thousands of Jews, now I don't know how many I've met in my life. There is a huge difference between the grandfathers and the generation of the grandfathers and mother and the generation of the grandchildren. Those who are now attending American colleges or universities, and their perception of Israel is totally different. 30% of them believe Israel is an apartheid state. a huge percentage, over 30, they support the Palestinians and not the Israelis, and so on and so forth. So we have a challenge there. And why? Because they look at the world differently and they look at Israel differently. For them, having the Jewish state is not a miracle, it's just a fact. And they look at Israel as like any other single state on earth.
Yeah, but there is also...
if you feel that my answers are too long,
no,
no
problem. I'm used to it, so okay. So there is also a major change. Israel is now a wealthy country. It used to be that we have these drives in the diaspora to help Israel with money and trees from Keren Kayem and all. Now Israel is more wealthy than most of the diaspora communities. And maybe the diaspora now needs more Israel than in the past. Don't you think so?
I absolutely agree with you. And that's why I lead the campaign for giving, not for only for taking. I know you are very generous and you've been helping Israel for many years, and you will continue to give to Israel, also because giving is part of your culture. It's part of Jewish culture. But I'm the one who preaches back home to the Israelis that the relationship should be mutual, reciprocal. And we have to give, not less than to give. And if you are aware of it, we are involved in the Jewish education system here in Mexico, as well as in some other countries, and the Jewish communities in Latin America. We are involved in security projects here. We are combating anti-Semitism worldwide, including YouTube. And I will do more. And I'm using literally Israeli taxpayer money to help the diaspora. And I believe that should be on our agenda. Bennett served in that capacity, the Prime Minister, so he understands. And he understands, and others do. I think that I will not be the Foreign Minister, Lieberman, the Finance Minister, other senior governments understand the importance of the diaspora, and also they understand that it costs money. It's not about shaking hands and hugging each other. These are the challenges. Let's see what Israel can do for us.
Many people, before we started, asked me to ask you about what's going on in Jerusalem today, because it's Yom Yerushalaim, and it seems that there is some kind of conflict. I don't know what's going to happen, but many people told me, you have to ask the minister about that. Well, I am asking.
I was very much concerned, and during the night I woke up a few times. I missed my family, but that's not the reason. And I was looking at my iPhone to figure out if something happened. There were some riots on the mountain, on the Temple Mountain in the morning, and then during the day, but not a major clash between Jews and Arabs. You know, today should be a day of celebration. We celebrate Israel's 52nd Jerusalem Day, but there's always the danger of between Jews and Arabs. There are 400,000 Arabs living in Jerusalem. 40% of the Jerusalem population is made of Arabs. By the way, they are not Israeli citizens. That's another matter. And the tension is very high. Not only that, there's huge incitement coming from many of us from Gaza and Hezbollah in the north. They're all watching the scene. What's going on. So it is relatively, it is quiet, nothing major happened. I hope by now it's all over, but we'll see how it develops, maybe overnight. There were thousands and thousands of police officers, all kinds of, in Jerusalem today, to make sure that the flags parade will be able to march into the old city within the Muslim quarter. That can be regarded as a kind of provocation, but have no doubt, Jerusalem is one, Jerusalem is united, Jerusalem is under Israeli sovereignty, and we are not going to divide Jerusalem and never. So that should be clear. At the same time, we have to be tuned to the fact that there are Christians, Muslims, and Jews living together. We have to give everyone the freedom of religion, and we have to understand that Jerusalem is also the world capital. It's not only about us.
Absolutely. Let me ask you, there is a war in Europe. We are concerning that in Mexico, that is so far away, of what's happening in the Ukraine and the invasion of the Russian army. Of course, Israel has to play this very carefully because there are many, aspects of what can happen with that war. But one of the issues, as you as the minister of the diaspora, is the Ukrainian community.
Jewish community.
The Jewish community in Ukraine.
Yeah, they were.
So why don't you tell us about that? What are you doing? Are you doing something?
We have been working very closely with the Jewish community in Ukraine, and there were at least 200,000 Jews according to the law of return, which means that at least one member of father, mother, grandfather, grandmother of the family are Jewish. Jews, according to the halakha, only 43,000.
For Mexican standards?
For Mexican standards, a lot, but it's a middle-sized city in Israel.
Yeah.
And it's also proportionally the same, by the way, in Russia, 150 Jews spread out all over Russia, and 600,000 eligible for Aliyah, which is a major story as well. And my ministry has been working very closely with the leaders of the Jewish community there, mainly the Chabad rebels. You should know that Chabad is very powerful in former Soviet Union, including Ukraine, and they all the communities together. They all get together. The rabbis are the leaders of the communities, at least half of the community. Then there are other organizations, mainly the JDC, the Joint Distribution Committee, also involved deeply. So we made an assessment of what their needs are, where, and we decided to support them financially, something that has never been done by the government of Israel. Just sending money to the communities for food, medicine, shelters, and whatever they asked for. When the war broke out, everyone was jumping in, so we moved aside a little bit, but we continue to work and to listen to them. And now we are working on a major project the day after the war, because we don't know the number, but scores of thousands of Jews left Ukraine. By the way, you should know.
Yeah, they are doing the action of them.
I will talk about it in a minute, but 12 million Ukrainians left their homes. 12 million out of 42 million. 6 million left the country. A huge number. Within that, also so I've been there, I was watching the scene, I didn't cross into Ukraine because I didn't want to cause any diplomatic crisis between us and Ukraine, but I met the foreign ministry embassy staff that are, they moved to Poland, and now I think they are back in Kiev when things get a little bit more normal. They are doing a great job with the diplomats as well. Saving life and doing good community. Aliyah. So 10,000 Jews arrived in Israel from Ukraine. But remember, those are half families. Half families, no men. The men were left behind.
They are forbidden to
They are forbidden to the country. So all not all the time, but most of the time, they are communicating with their second half of the family. But 10,000 of them applied for Aliyah. In Israel, huge needs. I know, and I saw that other organizations are raising money for them, and thank you very much again. 30,000 non-Jews arrived in Israel as well. Wow. Yes, I was fighting my own personal war to let them in. It wasn't simple. There are many issues. I don't want to bother you, but they live in Israel currently, and I guess that when the war is over, some of them are leaving the country anyhow. You should know that the European countries are very generous with the refugees from Germany, Sweden, Britain, even the United States, of course, Europe, every single state is letting them to come and stay and work for at least 3 years.
Yeah.
And also they are much closer than in Israel. In Israel, they want to go back, they have to fly out. But they are staying, most of them in Europe, waiting for the war. Many of them will return already. Yeah. Even under the current situation, they prefer to stay with their families. It's a big tragedy. It's a big tragedy that we haven't witnessed since the Second World War.
Yeah, we have to be very aware of that, even in all the countries and all the Jewish communities. We have to really help them, because now I don't know how this war is going to end. Of course, maybe Mr. Bennett, the Prime Minister, is going to have a more accurate answer.
The state of Israel has been helping them, but not with military staff. We send a field hospital for a few weeks. We send a lot of humanitarian aid. Hundreds, maybe thousands of Israelis, but not only Israelis, came to help them along the borders with Romania and Moldova and Hungary and every neighboring state. Israelis are very excited about it. It's interesting. More than the government. More than the government was quiet, but from political, not the public. Listen, every Jew is responsible, in my view, to the life of people that are fleeing a war zone and are refugees. We, the people of we were refugees all our life. We are sons, grandsons, great-grandsons of refugees. So we have special responsibility for refugees. That's how I see it. And that's why I was pushing very hard for getting more and more Israelis in Israel. They are not going to stay in Israel. They are not going to change the balance between Jews and non-Jews in the country. We are safe because they stay in Israel as long as the war is going on, and maybe even before they will leave the country. But I'd like that the state of the Jewish people will open its gates for people that are looking for a bed to sleep and to take a shower. And that's how I believe. And we'll see.
We have that.
I want this war. I want. There are more and more of them still coming in, but they don't get too much from the government. They are not recognized as refugees. Yeah. Israel hasn't given them the status of refugees. Still, they prefer to come to
because of the relationship of Israel with Russia.
No, because they have relatives in Israel, and they're somehow not recognized as Jews, but still they want to come and stay with their families. It's such a heavy burden on their hosting families. And now we try to convince the government, I'm in the government,
Yeah.
where I'm trying to convince my colleagues to let them work or to do something for them. So we'll see how it works. The reality actually dictates the situation more than someone planned for it.
Let me change the subject, and I would like to ask you about what is your opinion about global anti-Semitism? I mean, do we have more to be concerned? Do we have to be less concerned? How the anti-Semitism has changed during these years? What's your opinion about that?
We have to be concerned about anti-Semitism. We've noticed in the past few years, but especially in the past year, a huge spike in anti-Semitism, both in the public sphere, in the streets of Brooklyn, or in the streets of London, or in the streets of any other European state. I don't know.
So in the West,
in the West, yeah. I don't know enough about the East. That's all.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on in Russia.
Yeah.
If two yeshiva buchers now being attacked in Sibir, I would never know about it. It will never be reported. Freedom of information exists only on this side, not on that side. But we know that Jews are extremely exposed to violence in the streets in numbers that we haven't witnessed. And secondly, something that bothers me even more is the social media and anti-Semitism. They became good friends. The social media, in a way, encourages anti-Semitic content because it creates a lot of traffic, and they love traffic because traffic gives them money and encourages them more advertisement, and more money is coming as a result of it. And I hate to speak about it, but the fact is that they don't do enough to eliminate the anti-Semitic content, even if they know about it. My ministry we developed a certain system, you know, with the high-tech nation, so we have some ways to figure out how to, yeah, we know where we are tracking. We are tracking real time. I can show you the spot, how this is going on. Yeah, like the one after the CNN reporter was killed, and we don't know yet by whom. I hope it was not us, but if it was us, that's it. But again, immediately there was a spot, so it responds very quickly to current affairs, and you can figure out if something happens, what will happen the next day. So we know for sure that if a war breaks out tonight in the Middle East between us and Hamas and us and the Palestinians, you'll see it in the moments. Yeah.
So that's interesting, and I know that you just have a meeting in Cancun with the Latin American Jewish communities. How do you see the Latin American diaspora? What's your take?
I should honestly tell you that where's my teacher, Silvio? Where's Silvio? Silvio left the room.
He already left, so...
He's done. He lost his position. But Silvio has been in touch with me for a long time. He teaches me a lot about it. I was not very much familiar with the Jewish world. Much more informed and familiar with the North American Jewry, where I spent quite a number of years and lived. So, and also Europe. But now I've got from my own impressions, and I'm much more convinced that we have to get more involved. Listen, the challenge is huge. And I don't know how to do it, honestly. I figured out that maybe if we do it through, and I mentioned it last night, through the digital world, we can communicate with more Jews around the world than we do right now. Because every school has 1,000 kids, 500 kids, sometimes 400 kids, but that's not now small numbers. But if we can hit the entire community, people get to learn, because people here know how to use their iPhone or iPad or tablet and so on, computer. And through that communication, we can reach out immediately and instantly. Silvio was hired right now by the Jewish the World Zionist Organization.
You are fired.
He was hired in 30 seconds. But that's very difficult to Israelis. They hire, fire, and they don't remember why he was hired, why he was fired. That's the way. So I said, Silvio, that you were my tutor about Latin America, and we decided to hold a meeting, and I come back. Before I forget everything I saw, because I tell you, a month from now I would know where I were. That's the way it is in Israel. But before that, we have to sit down and discuss what can be done with Silvio and other, he works for the World Zionist Organization, other organizations involved. What can we do to improve the relationship and to invest our money in the right way, the way we see it will be most effective.
What do you think is the biggest challenge for the diaspora communities, for the Jewish diaspora communities?
To remain Jewish.
To remain Jewish.
That's the
more than anti-Semitism.
When I speak in the cabinet meeting, when I have an opportunity and I raise my hand and I talk, it's always about the future of the Jewish people and the impact of our decisions on Jewish communities abroad. But the bottom line is how to keep the Jewish people, because you should know, we are shrinking all the time. The numbers are going down. I don't know. I guess you are aware of it. That's the reality.
So the biggest challenge is assimilation.
Assimilation, yeah. So the one that grows all the time is in Germany. The Jews the Germans are extremely generous when it comes, but only the Jews according to the Halakha. They are very strict, not the Jews who can make the wider definition of Jew, the one only according to the Halakha. But they are over 200,000. In UAE and Gulf, Jews are moving there because business, option. And so I had a conversation with them on Zoom, and they spoke like 6, 7 different accents. You know English, or still English, but each one came from a different place. That's fine. Of course, Israel is booming. When it comes to grandchildren, we are doing very well. Also, I met a lady in the gym every year, and she has 12 grandchildren. I don't know who she is. I'm sure she was cheating. 12. I said, where from? She said, The average size of Israeli, not Orthodox family, secular one, is a little bit over 3, which is a world record.
Yeah.
We don't have place to live in Israel. It's too small. We are building now to the height, because not only Tel Aviv, everywhere. When you see a couple of countries, you see building, and still the prices are going high. Marcus, you should build in Israel. No, you don't want to work with Jews, I understand. I understand that. It's one of the issues that we have to pay attention to is for the young generation. They cannot afford their first apartment. It's too expensive. You have to work like 220 months, something like that, to purchase your apartment. It's huge, it's big, it's something that and the prices are still going up.
Let's talk about the demographic change in Israel. This very hard balance, equilibrium between Jews and Arabs, and especially Palestinians. How do you handle that in the cabinet, in the current cabinet?
First of all, between the sea and the river, taking into consideration Gaza, Israeli Arabs, Arabs in Jerusalem, which have special status, and Arabs on the West Bank, there are more Arabs than Jews.
That's it, at this point, right?
Yeah. Because within Israel, it's different. Within Israel, the Green Line, it's different. The Arabs' birth rate, Israeli Arab birth rate is going down dramatically. 2 kids, sometimes 3 kids a family. Dramatically. And they are the new Jews. They send their kids to study abroad, to Europe. 40% of the new MDs in Israel now are Arabs that studied abroad and coming back to the country and become MDs in Israeli hospital. If you come to Israeli hospital now, don't be surprised. You'll be handled by Arabs from the beginning, including the process. In many, many positions, including senior ones, Arabs. 90% of the pharmacists in Israel are Arabs. Of course, construction builders as well, and truck drivers, and so on. There is much more integration of the Israeli Arab society into the general society. And one of the achievements of the present government, which I'm proud to be a member of, is that we have finally an Arab party as equal members of the present coalition. First time as a party.
Yeah.
And for the second time, we have an Israeli Arab as a government minister.
That's right.
That should change. I mean, there's no reason whatsoever that Arab will not be part of the leading or the leaders of the leadership of Israel. But you asked me about the demography in Israel. So the 2 poorest sections of the Israeli society are the Arabs and the Orthodox Jews. Their poverty is enormous, and they don't care. They care less. I mean, they care more, I would say, but not enough. Calculating the future of their families, because the country, the state, will not be able to carry the burden of such a huge number of Orthodox kids that are not studying in school the core studies of what we need to be citizens of the 21st century. English, computers, sciences, and so on and so forth. Studying only Limudei Kodesh is fine, or Hebrew, many of them speak Yiddish between themselves. That will stop them from becoming. It's not only about personal life. My 8 grandchildren will not be able to pay for 50 or 60 kids on the other side. I have one of my cousins returned the tshuva. He has an endless number of grandchildren. When we had a family gathering, we all came with private cars, he came with 2 buses. The same family. nice boys and girls dressed in black and white, respecting their grandparents. I hope my children, when my grandchildren respect me the same. Safta, what do you need? Sit down, we'll help you. Everything was fine, except that I don't know what the future of those young children. I don't know what's their future, because some of them return b'she'elah and change, but many of them stay in the close circle of the Orthodox community. Half of the children now in Kita Aleph, in 8th grade, are either Arabs or Orthodox. The numbers are soaring all the time.
Do you think
by the year 2050 or 60, where I'm not sure that I will be around any longer, they will make like 40% of the Israeli society. So I will see that.
Do you think Israel, because of this demographic reality, Israel is in peril to lose the Jewish condition as a Jewish state? It's going to become a binational state with Arabs and Jews?
No, I think we will be the majority, because we are working so hard also to produce these, but we'll be the majority. But the question is, it's not the majority of the world. We have to, in my position, we have to find a way to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and let the Palestinians have their own state, without giving up on security consideration that always been the highest priority. But that's the only way if we want to keep Israel as a Jewish democratic state. Anyhow, there are doubts about that, and we are working very hard to convince the world that we are still not only Jewish but democratic too. That's the best solution, but at this stage there's no partner on the other side, and also we can notice that on the Palestinian side they're getting more and more to the extreme. If elections are being held today on the West Bank, Hamas will win.
Really?
Yes, that's why there are no elections. Hamas will win. There were elections in one of the universities, not the one in Ramallah, I think. They won easily. The Hamas won. So Arabs are turning also to the extreme, which is terrible.
I think about 10 years ago I interviewed here exactly the then president of Israel, the late Shimon Peres, and I asked him about what was the biggest threat for Israel, and he said without any hesitation, Iran.
Iran, yes.
Iran. Still Iran, you would say?
Yes, Iran is the major enemy, and Israel and Iran are already engaged in a war, but it's a quiet war. It's under the radar screen. You don't see it, but it's out of the radar screen. But there is a war between Israel and Iran, and you can read about it in the news. And I don't want to tell you which news and when, but in general, you hear a lot about certain. Well, in Syria, it's clear that we are constantly attacking any delivery of arms from Iran to the Hezbollah. Yeah. We are cutting the lines of supply between Hezbollah because there's a special project of making the Hezbollah rockets more accurate than they are now, which one day they will serve Iran in the war against Israel. You should know that in our border there are two proxies. One is Hezbollah in the north, the other is Hamas in the south. Both of them get orders from Iran. This purposely was done by Iran, so they actually position on our border. They tried also in Syria, but from Syria we drew a red line, so we are not going to let them cross the line. But they are literally in Lebanon, and whatever left from Lebanon, which is a dying state, and interesting enough, the Hezbollah lost the elections, and the one in Gaza. But the question is about nuclear Iran. They are very close. They are very close to get to the point where they will be able to produce a bomb. There is no bomb yet, and they are not there yet, but they are working very hard to enrich uranium.
But Israel is not going to allow Iran to have
No, and America too. North America. I say America here, and those no, I mean the United States have made it clear. What will they do? Don't ask me, I have no idea. But both, say, 4 or 5 last presidents Trump, Biden, all of them committed America to stop the Iranian preparation for nuclear bomb. How and when and where will they do it? I don't know. Israel made it clear that but it sounds good, but we don't know where the facilities are, but probably under Trump it would be. So there's certainly ways to threaten Iran to make sure that they don't play games with Israel. But this is the major indication.
I know that you were in the military, and I don't know if you know the answer to this question, but I read an article in the New York Times about how they killed the head of this scientific team in Iran, and that they used this artificial intelligence, drones, and all of that. I don't know if you can tell us that story, because it's...
I read it in the news.
Yeah? The same
description I saw, and I was really interested, yeah.
I mean, there was one different world. You don't need to come over, operatives in the ground.
Iranians only in the past 2 weeks that also were assassinated in similar ways. And the Iranians suspect that Israel is standing behind it.
I suspect that too, by the way.
But be honest with you, there are others that will replace them. Soleimani, the head of the Revolutionary Guard, was killed assassinated a few years ago. Israel and the United States in cooperation. There's someone replaced him. I mean, that's the way it is. But in between, there also it served as a threat to the nuclear scientists and others, not to get too close to Israel. The Israeli diplomats and Israeli communities are under danger. We all remember the story of Anya in Cyrus, the Jewish embassy. They've been trying all the time. Yeah, and we are aware of the attempts to...
No, what is the use of this new technology with artificial intelligence? It's drones, exactly.
But let's tell you, Iran is an extremely sophisticated country.
Yes.
It's not one of those Middle Eastern countries that we were...
they were an empire.
Superiority.
No, they were an empire, very important.
And also, remember, they are under sanctions, and so what? The prices are high, there are demonstrations and so on. Once in a while they kill some of the demonstrators because they want to show them that they won't let it continue, but at the same time, they survive. They survive. They have to humanity.
No, absolutely. I wouldn't underestimate them. Well, I'm done with the questions.